Today on Context, we take a deeper look at life behind bars. Should prison be a dead end or a new beginning?
Lock 'em up and throw away the key is the old adage. Bad guys are dangerous, and a morally just society should protect its citizens, right? But in a day and age where prison is glamorized in movies and TV, should we pause and wonder whether prison is the solution for today's offenders? Today on Context, we go behind the bars of our preconceived notions about prison to talk with experts and activists about the pros and cons of today's prison system as we ask, is prison the best solution when dealing with offenders?
Sheldon Neal recently sat down with a man who's learned from 30 years of a different kind of hard labor, how to help ex-cons turn their lives around. The recently retired president of Prison Fellowship International, Ron Nickel, has a one-of-a-kind perspective on the challenge of changing prison into a productive and even life-transforming place. Take a look.
Does prison have a dead end? Is that the dead end when one goes into prison?
Well, prison shouldn't be a dead end. Inevitably, however, it is for the majority of people who are imprisoned. It is a dead end in the sense that having been through the prison experience, it's almost impossible for them to reintegrate successfully into society. All kinds of things are stacked against them, from employment accessibility, housing accessibility, community support. And so up to 70% of the people who are in prison today will either reoffend after they come out or have reoffended, and this is not their first time inside.
You said, based on everything you have seen, and I want to make sure I get this right, caging people does not make them good. My question is, what factors do make the difference in a person's life when they are in prison for a certain amount of years?
Well, I mean, we could spend an hour on that question. You know, I often say that putting a bicycle into a garage doesn't make it a car. Putting a human being into a cage, a human being who has all kinds of difficulties, perhaps deficiencies, putting that person into a caged environment isn't going to produce anything good. You have people who may have difficulty making proper decisions. You take decision making away from them by putting them into an institution. Are they going to come out good decision makers? You know, so it's things like that. Taking a person who might have a bad kind of moral disposition, putting them into an institution that is populated entirely with people who have the same disposition. Is that going to correct their moral disposition? Impossible. I think prisons are the most illogical institutions ever devised by humankind.
What about the concept, and this might be a superficial level, but the concept of, hey, you know what, you did something and now you have to pay for what you did. So in that, realize and change. Obviously, you're saying it's not that simple, or isn't that an important factor?
Well, there have to be consequences for crime.
Yeah.
The punishment should suit the crime, however. The ultimate goal of justice is to bring people back into society in with better ability to manage their relationships, to manage their behavior. But our justice system, and I'm not speaking only in Canada here, but I think globally it's true, that the justice system is focused punitively. And we think that once a person's guilt has been determined and they've been punished, then justice has been done. But punishment does not equate to justice. Punishment is part of the equation, but it isn't tantamount to justice.
What kind of help, in your estimates, do you feel people need when they leave prison and are now trying to reintegrate back into communities? What kind of help do they need?
Well, first of all, they need friendship. They need a community. And that begins not at the moment that the doors open and they're released into the community. It should begin whilst they are in prison. In most instances, there is no bridge back into the community, at least not a helpful bridge. And it's often said that crime is a problem of the community. The community is part of the solution. But what happens is that the prison walls create a barrier between the community and the offender. And we leave it at that. We take community out of the equation. For a person to successfully reintegrate after prison, community is absolutely essential. There has to be a place for them, a place where they belong and they get support, they get encouragement, they get the kind of assistance that they need to make the right decisions at the right time in order to get employment, in order to find a place to live, all of those things that are necessarily for reintegration.
What are the scales of fear like as when an inmate leaves prison versus the community wondering, hey, should I reach out to this gentleman? Should I reach out? How scared? What are those scales looking like?
It's mutual fear.
Yeah.
So we become separated by fear. Yeah, the community is fearful, and depending on the nature of the offense, they're apprehensive. Now, what's going to happen if this person comes back to our neighborhood? And we try to keep them out. But the offender has the same kind of fear. Will I be accepted? What's going to happen to my life? Will I be able to get on with things? So there's that mutual fear that inhabits this potential relationship or reintegration of a person into the community that makes it very, very difficult. But we think that all people who are in prison are probably dangerous to the community. And less than 3% would be violent offenders and represent a real and present danger to the community. The rest are not. Many of them are victims in their own right, and so we have a way of blaming the victim. The victim acts out because of their own victimization, and they victimize others. Prison is not a solution for that kind of dynamic. And so I think the first thing we have to rethink is the overuse of imprisonment. We have to look for alternatives.
If you could build an ideal person or prison system, what would be some of the key components that you would add and perhaps remove, and tell us why?
I think the biggest thing that we can do, the most important thing that we can do is to make prisons accessible to the community. So that the lives of people who are incarcerated are normalized. Prison's not a normal environment. You think of the relationships. What is the population of prison? It's offenders. And if you want to normalize that population, you have to allow the community to come in with all kinds of remedial programs, programs that nurture the spirit, that nurture their social lives, their physical lives, their intellectual lives, that are helpful.
Ron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
If you'd like more information about Prison Fellowship and the types of programs and services they provide for those in prison and their families, there are links on our website directing you to those answers. Next, have you ever wondered what it would feel like to try and reintegrate back into society after serving time in prison? Well, we had a team of law-abiding executives gather in our office to try and experience that. Sheldon Neal gives us a front row view.
A new game has been designed to help communities that will be accepting offenders have a better understanding of the process of reintegration. Essentially, it is designed to put the participants in the shoes of the offender. I had the opportunity to sit down and test this game in its beta phase.
We work to serve inmates, ex-offenders, their families, and victims with relational and holistic programs that provide treatment and education and really get them on the road to a pro-social, positive life that's rewarding for both them and safer for communities as well.
The game is simple, in theory. Get to the end of the game in 30 moves or 75 minutes without losing your stability points.
But we can't get all the way over there. It doesn't look like we can get there from here.
Okay, we got to put two together here.
So this is a game that we have developed and for the purpose of engaging communities in what is really a very difficult conversation. So the game is about understanding what the successful pillars of stability, if you will, are to be successful in community. So those pillars would be stable housing, stable relationships, and stable employment.
There's threat of personal injury. What do you think is the implication of personal injury to someone who's reintegrating themselves back into society?
Inability to work.
Inability to work. And if they have an inability to work, what's the implication of that?
No income.
No income. If they then have no income, what's the implication of that? No rent. If they have no rent, then they have no food, no residence, no anything. So the cycle in very short order can be disrupted.
Keeping them isolated from community will continue the cycle of crime. The inmates who are incarcerated are coming back to society, and so the degree to which we're willing to work with them and build into their lives has a direct consequence to the level of safety and that we're going to experience in our own community. Keeping an inmate constantly isolated, whether behind bars or keeping them isolated in the community, will contribute to increase in mental illness, an increase in criminal behavior, an increase in antisocial behavior.
40% of released prisoners re-offend within 30 days of release because they cannot get their pillars of stability in place. And like life itself, the game has many twists and turns, and getting to the finish line is easier said than done.
Make sure you achieve the pillars of stability quota. So the pillars of stability.
Whatever those are.
So how much does it cost?
That's my question. How much does it cost to start building there?
From the start, it's a race against time to get everything we need without losing our stability points.
I need 1 red. I need 6 yellow. 2, 4, 6. I need 5 red. Wow. So essentially, it's a race against the clock. We need to build this residence or structure here and buy 2 crisis cubes with the money that we have so that we don't lose all the points with this. If we don't build this fast enough and buy our cubes before the crisis hits, which I've been told undercover in 2 minutes,
You got your stone.
we lose everything.
You have the right stone.
65?
You have 29 minutes left. 29 minutes left.
Oh, you need the map.
So now we're right now trying to build the biggest structure we can to get us the most points. You think something's easy, and you discover when reality hits, it may not be as easy as you thought.
You're now facing a financial crisis.
Right now, if we don't get these crisis cubes, we lose all of our points.
So I need crisis cubes, crisis cubes.
Man, victory short-lived.
It's stressful to always be thinking 2 steps ahead. We're thinking that we're getting ahead and then we miss something completely. You need to strategize, and I think if you're thinking of the real system coming out, someone coming out of prison, to have this kind of strategy and like a 4-pronged approach, it's almost impossible, really.
We're a long way from hitting our quotas, that's for sure. Yeah, the game is really hard because the rules aren't clear when you start out.
Isn't it closer this way to go? Why don't we go to 22?
Okay.
Let's go.
Blue ones, I'll get her two.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
High five.
Did we win?
High five.
Nailed it.
Not you.
Well done, team. Well done.
What you did today very much replicated real life. How many of you felt overwhelmed in that first 15 minutes? People say, well, you know, they don't try hard. They don't want to do it. They're, you know, they put a lot of blame, and that's not necessarily true. The fact is, a lot of the odds are very much stacked against them. And we're not blaming the system. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to say, listen, we have an opportunity to bring hope. We have an opportunity to bring life. We have an opportunity to bring encouragement to help some folks make it. There's a massive amount of pressure. And so what we're trying again to do is replicate some of that so that our empathy and our grace can rise, and we can say, is there a way then we can have some support or some advocacy.
It really was a team effort because you had to be strategizing like three moves ahead.
Yeah.
So somebody coming out, and you could not do this on your own.
Having no team, having no community,
You have to have a team
right.
surrounding you.
Yeah.
When we come back, Cliff and Wilma Dirksen on learning how to live after the murder of their daughter. We've heard these news reports that people are forced to be converted or killed.
They tell them in 24 hours they have a choices to convert to Islam or to pay the ransom, or they have to leave everything or face death.
كل أغراضنا وبيوتنا كلها موجودة. حتى السيارة ما قدرت تجيبها هناك. وجه عليه المسدس قال لي بدك البيت ولا السيارة ولا المسدس.
There are people who are staring down the barrel of a gun and being asked to renounce their faith in Christ or to die.
حتى لو كان بيد الصليب مهما يكون ما نتخلى عنه.
Your chance to help this refugee crisis begins with an email. Please write to refugeesponsorship@cmacan.org. Here at Context, we love to hear from you, our viewers at home. Recently, David wrote, "Your show is ridiculous. Hopefully, no tax dollars are funding this garbage." Well, David, you'll be happy to know that our show is entirely funded by our viewers, and we'd like to take this opportunity to say how much we appreciate your donations to help us share Christian stories. Thank you for helping us make television we can all be proud of. Well, everyone except for David.
This segment is brought to you by Bruce Etherington and Associates, Family Harmony and Philanthropy, helping you help others.
Few families have been as public on crime, punishment, and forgiveness as Wilma and Cliff Dirksen. I sat down with them in their Winnipeg home to find out how their daughter's murder shaped their search for justice. Take us back and tell us just how typical a day it was when all of this began to unfold for you.
We were just a happy family. Cliff was very busy and so was I, and Candace called me from school and asked me if she could have a ride home, and it was just so normal. And she was happy. We were happy. We were very poor, but there's something quite wonderful about being poor and being excited about going out to McDonald's. And that's what we were going to do. I was down in the basement, and all of a sudden I realized time had ticked away. And I came upstairs and I glanced at the clock, and Candace wasn't walking through the door and she wasn't upstairs playing with the kids. And I just had that awful, dreadful sinking feeling that something happened very quickly.
On November 30th, 1984, Candace was only 13 years old when she never returned from school. Her body was found 6 weeks later, tied up and frozen on the dirt floor of a storage shed only 500 meters from her home. The case remained a mystery for 23 years until DNA evidence convicted a man who was sentenced to life with no parole for 25 years. Wilma and Cliff Dirksen thought they finally had a sense of closure. But in spring 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada threw out the conviction, forcing the Dirksens to face the reality that a new trial would be needed. Cliff, how are you preparing yourself for news and what lies ahead of this new trial?
I think I would have to say one of the huge things has to do with my faith and where I am at with that. And I have to work very proactively about keeping myself level on a spiritual level.
How do you stay level when you are facing this?
I have a men's group that I can say anything to and we can talk about. I have a personal devotional life that I take care of. I do some memory work, and we're constantly conscious of our devotional life together. So that's basically, I think, the core of it.
Wilma, how are you preparing yourself for what lies ahead?
Oh, I think of some practical things, but I think there is also a place where I just want to stay at peace with the moment. I don't need to know. It's okay to have mystery. It's okay to live in the tension of not knowing, and try to center myself in the same way that Cliff does, but also just staying in the moment and not letting myself worry.
Wilma and Cliff have used art and writing to help them process the forgiveness they faced Candace's murder with. A deep understanding that God forgives the human race has anchored them. Wilma chronicled their 3 decades of that journey in This Mortal Coil, an intricate look at the imperfect work of searching for justice. In the last 2 years, we've seen a shift, a change in how we talk about crime and punishment. We've seen the war on terror move in and people become more fearful. How do you feel about the tone that's being set in Canada?
I worry about the polarization that's happening. I think that we need to move together more to find the answers and not further apart.
Is this tone, this attitude we have worse than when your story started with crime 31 years ago?
Yes, it's getting worse. And I think the desperation in our prison systems is going to become even more horrendous. I don't think we can lock a spirit, any spirit, up in prison and expect us to be free of the reaction of that. We can't dam up water forever, and we can't dam up human living people without serious repercussions. And so I just think we need to look at it all. We need to put some creative thinking into this. It's not perfect the way it is. We do need prisons, though. And that's the tension. We do need to do things, but the methods, we need to reconsider them.
You've both been open about faith, about the Bible. Cliff, the Bible you memorize. What does the Bible say about justice for Candace?
Now, Wilma is the one that has come up with this concept, and I think you need to talk about it, but it's the love first, justice second kind of idea.
Wilma, what does that mean? Love first, justice second.
We need to see the value of every human being first, and we need to start there. We need to say to people, you know what, you're quite wonderful, God's made you, and I know what your gifts are, and we need to start there. And then the conversation has to go now. What in the Sam Hill were you thinking? Why did you do something so dreadful? And that's what love first, justice second means. They have to be close together. And talking about Candace, Candace was a person who actually loved bullies. I mean, she was a child who just had this enormous love for everybody that was almost unusual. And we had teachers telling us that they would put her beside the bully in class because she could deal with them. So this whole story that lines up with prison she's a forerunner. Her story and her personality is a forerunner that kind of helps us in finding the path through it.
Cliff, you've seen Wilma go in and out of prison. You've heard the stories, you've seen what it's done to her and the stories she's brought back. What do you conclude about what she's learning and about our justice system?
Well, I think it's just amazing that she can walk into the prison system and they all do exactly what she asked them to do.
They love you, don't they?
And I love them. I do. I think I've met some very, very beautiful souls. Most of them.
Can you explain that? You've met beautiful souls in prison.
Yes, I think that we need to value everybody. Everybody's a gift here on earth, and some people make horrendous mistakes, and some people are so damaged they need to be in prison. But that doesn't mean we give up hope on them. And there is, and when there's a connection with anybody, it doesn't matter who, there's something beautiful that happens, and I think prison allows an environment where people are searching their souls. And when I come in with my story, it brings us all to a new reality where we have to do some real serious thinking. And those kind of moments are always very precious.
we come back, crime, punishment, and forgiveness. My thoughts on that next. Here at Context, we love to hear from you, our viewers at home. Recently, David wrote, "Your show is ridiculous. Hopefully no tax dollars are funding this garbage." Well, David, you'll be happy to know that our show is entirely funded by our viewers, and we'd like to take this opportunity to say how much we appreciate your donations to help us share Christian stories. Thank you for helping us make television we can all be proud of. Well, everyone except for David.
Why just watch Context when you can be part of it? To join our live studio audience in Toronto's CBC Broadcasting Centre, give us a call at 416-599-9777, extension 58, or email us at tickets@contextwithlorna.com.
Missed an episode? Catch up with our podcasts. Get up to date on the latest conversations from beyond the headlines. Simply go to our website, click on our link to find current and past podcasts on iTunes. It's free, don't delay. Today we took a deeper look into the lives of people affected by prison. We talked with advocates like Ron Nickel, who work tirelessly to help those who've gone to jail transition to become productive citizens. Ron Nickel told us quite simply that locking someone up doesn't solve the problem. And I think there is a deeper lesson here that ultimately takes us back to the teachings of Jesus. There's always the possibility for redemption. We all need forgiveness for the moral laws we have broken. And the good news is, through Jesus and his love for each of us, we can be forgiven no matter what we have done. God's second chance is always there because Jesus paid our ransom to reconcile us to God. But we must claim it for ourselves. And the Dirksons summarized it best with their journey to forgive their daughter's murderer. Christ's forgiveness brought them to a conclusion of peace. What a challenge that whether we welcome a prisoner into our community with the hope of giving them a fresh start, or whether we are asking for a fresh start for ourselves, new beginnings are always possible. Check out the resources we've left on this at our website. Share this episode with someone via podcast. You can find more details there at iTunes or online and all at our website. Join us again next week as we explore life beyond the headlines. That was a fast one. Very quick. These news reports that people are forced to be converted or killed.
They tell them in 24 hours they have a choices to convert to Islam or to pay the ransom, or they have to leave everything or face death.
كل أغراضنا وبيوتنا كلها باقوة. حتى السيارة ما قدرت تجيبها هناك. وجه عليه المسدس قال لي بدك البيت ولا السيارة ولا المسدس.
There are people who are staring down the barrel of a gun and being asked to renounce their faith in Christ or to die.
حتى لو كان بيد الصليب مهما يكون ما نتخلى عنه.
Your chance to help this refugee crisis begins with an email. Please write to refugeesponsorship@cmacan.org.